Parents sell their house and fritter away $250,000. So I tell it's going to be bad soon and they laugh at me. My parents sold our family home for $250,000 and I knew we were doomed the moment they popped champagne to celebrate. They laughed, called it their big break, while I stood in the empty living room, staring at the faded outlines where our family photos once hung. By the end of the year, the money was gone, and so was any hope of stability. I'm Ethan, 24, the only child of Mark and Linda Harper, two people who believed life was a game of chance and they just rolled a jackpot. The house in Bristol, a modest three-bedroom with a sagging porch and a garden my mom once loved, had been our anchor. It wasn't much, but it was ours until they decided it was their ticket to living the dream. I begged them to reconsider. "You're throwing away our future," I said, my voice cracking as I stood in the kitchen, clutching a mug of cold tea. They just laughed, my dad's booming chuckle echoing off the bare walls. "Ethan, lighten up, we're free now." Free. That word haunted me as I watched them pack up decades of memories into cardboard boxes, most of which ended up in a skip. The house sold in March, the papers signed with a flourish, while my parents grinned like kids at a fair. I wasn't invited to the signing. They said I'd ruin the vibe. By April, they'd rented a flashy apartment in London, all glass and chrome, with a view of the Thames they couldn't afford. "It's temporary," Mom said, waving a hand adorned with a new gold bracelet. "We're investing the rest." Investing. That was their excuse for everything. Dad, with his endless get-rich-quick schemes, sank $50,000 into a friend's revolutionary crypto startup. "It's the future, Ethan," he'd say, showing me graphs on his phone that looked like a toddler's scribbles. Mom, meanwhile, discovered a passion for experiential travel. She booked a $20,000 safari in Kenya, posting photos of herself in a wide-brimmed hat, sipping cocktails while giraffes wandered in the background. I scrolled through her Instagram, my stomach twisting. "Where's the money for rent?" I texted her. She replied with a heart emoji and a picture of a sunset. By June, I was still in Bristol, crashing on my friend Jake's couch, working double shifts at a coffee shop to afford community college. I'd wanted to study engineering, but my savings were gone loaned to my parents for emergencies that turned out to be a new TV and a weekend in Paris. Every time I called, they had a new excuse. "We're diversifying our portfolio," Dad said, his voice slurred from one too many celebratory whiskeys. "You worry too much," Mom added, her tone light, like I was a kid afraid of the dark. I visited them in July, hoping to talk sense into them. The London apartment smelled of lavender candles and regret. Dad was on the phone, shouting about a sure thing stock tip, while Mom unpacked a box of designer clothes. "Ethan, look at this dress," she said, holding up something sparkly that probably cost my month's wages. I sat them down, my hands shaking. "You're burning through everything. What happens when it's gone?" Dad laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. "You sound like your grandpa, all doom and gloom." "We've got this," Mom nodded, her eyes bright with denial. "We're living. Ethan, you should try it." I left that night, my chest tight with a mix of anger and fear. They didn't get it. They didn't see the cliff they were sprinting toward. By August, the cracks started showing. The crypto startup folded, taking Dad's $50,000 with it. Mom's travel fund dried up after a trip to Bali, where she accidentally maxed out 2 credit cards. They called me, not for advice, but to borrow money. "Just a grand, Ethan," Dad said, his voice smaller than I'd ever heard. "We'll pay you back." I didn't have a grand. I barely had enough for rent. September brought the first eviction notice. The landlord of their fancy apartment wasn't amused by their promises of big wins coming soon. I got a frantic call from Mom at 2 a.m., her voice thick with tears. "We might lose the place," she whispered. I wanted to scream, to say I'd told them so, but all I felt was a hollow ache. I drove to London the next day, using my last $20 for gas. The apartment was a mess, empty wine bottles, unpaid bills stacked on the counter. Dad sat on the couch, staring at a blank TV screen. Mom paced, her nails bitten to the quick. "We didn't know it'd go this fast," she said, like it was a surprise. "I spent the weekend trying to fix their mess. I called the landlord, negotiated a payment plan they couldn't possibly keep. I sold Mom's designer clothes on eBay, ignoring her protests. 'You're embarrassing us,' she hissed, but her eyes were scared, not angry. Dad didn't say much, just nodded when I told him to cancel his stock trading app. For the first time, they listened, but it felt too late. By October, they were back in Bristol, renting a cramped flat above a chip shop. The smell of frying oil seeped into everything: clothes, furniture, hope. I visited when I could, bringing groceries because their fridge was always empty. Dad started driving for a rideshare app, his pride swallowed with every fare. Mom took a job at a call center, her voice flat as she answered complaints about late deliveries. They didn't laugh anymore. The 250,000 was gone, frittered away on dreams that never materialized. One night, over cheap takeout, I asked them why they'd thrown it all away. Mom looked at the table, her fingers tracing the edge of a napkin. "We wanted to feel alive," she said quietly. "After years of scraping by, we thought this was our chance." Dad nodded, his eyes distant. "We thought we could beat the odds." I wanted to be angry, but all I felt was grief for the house, for the family we'd been, for the trust I wasn't sure I'd ever get back. I started visiting more, not because I forgave them, but because I couldn't abandon them. We talked, really talked, for the first time in years. Dad admitted he'd been chasing a version of himself he'd never been: rich, fearless, untouchable. Mom confessed she'd been running from the monotony of her old life, terrified of growing old in a house that felt like a cage. Their honesty hurt, but it was a start. I took a second job, saved every penny, and helped them with rent when I could. It wasn't enough to fix everything, but it kept them afloat. One evening, as we sat in their tiny flat, Dad reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You were right, Ethan," he said, his voice rough. "We should have listened." Mom's eyes welled up, and she added, "We're proud of you. You're better than us." I didn't know what to say. I wasn't better, just different, scared in my own way, but determined not to let fear make my choices. Months passed, and we found a new rhythm. They worked, I studied, and we rebuilt something fragile but real. The house was gone, the money was gone, but we had each other, bruised, humbled, but still here. I don't know if we'll ever fully recover, but I know we're trying, and maybe that's enough. What do you think? Were my parents reckless dreamers or just human, chasing a spark in a world that feels too heavy? Share your thoughts. Where do you draw the line between living boldly and losing everything? In end,